Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, September 9th, 2025. All right, this episode of Anti-War News is sponsored by the Expat Money Online Summit, which returns this October. This is the third year in a row that they are sponsoring the show and that we are helping promote the event. And the Expat Money Summit is hosted by Mikkel Thorpe, the host of the Expat Money Show, a friend of ours at antiwar.com. And this free online event is packed with real strategies that you can use right now, like acquiring second residencies and citizenships, legally mitigating taxes, purchasing international real estate, setting up offshore banking, and more. This year's summit is focused on Latin America, and for very good reason, with all of the changing dynamics down there, and that is where Mikkel is based as well. So over 3 jam-packed days from October 10th to the 12th, Mikkel is bringing together top-tier experts to help you build your offshore plan B quickly and effectively in the region. Head over to expatmoneysummit.com to reserve your free ticket today. And once again, I will be speaking on one of the exclusive VIP panels. So if you want to get a VIP ticket, listeners of this show can use the code ANTIWAR for 20% off a VIP ticket, which includes lifetime replays, exclusive panels, and more. So go to expatmoneysummit.com and don't forget to use that code ANTIWAR if you want a VIP ticket for 20% off. Once again, expatmoneysummit.com. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Netanyahu says Gaza City offensive will intensify. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday threatened the Palestinian civilians in famine-stricken Gaza City, telling them to leave and warning that the assault on the city would intensify. The Israeli leader claimed that the Israeli Air Force took down 50 high-rise buildings over the past 2 days and warned that it was just the beginning of the offensive. The IDF's plans for Gaza City involve removing the entire civilian population of about 1 million people, the full military occupation, and then razing the entire city to the ground. These are their plans. Of course, Netanyahu and other Israeli officials claim, these high-rise buildings that they've been destroying have been used by Hamas. They've provided no evidence for that. The claim is that it's some sort of military infrastructure, but again, there's no evidence, and we know that Israel's plans are to destroy the entire city. So they can't claim that every building is used as like some kind of military infrastructure. And we also know that Netanyahu has said before that, one reason why the IDF is destroying all these houses and homes in Gaza City, in northern Gaza, is so Palestinians have nowhere to return, because their ultimate goal is ethnic cleansing. That's what this is about. And this picture here is very rough. 2 little girls who were killed by the IDF with the help of the U.S. government in airstrikes on a tent in Gaza City. And the picture shows their aunt mourning them. Their 2 aunts mourning these 2 little girls, Lehan Salem and Aman Salem, 2 years old and 5 years old. So this is Netanyahu's statement. He said, quote, "A few days ago, I promised you that we would bring down the terrorist high-rises in Gaza. This is exactly what we are doing. In the last 2 days, 50 such high-rises have fallen. The Air Force took them down. Now, all of this is only the introduction, only the beginning of the main intensive operation, the ground incursion of our forces that are now getting organized and gathering into Gaza City. Therefore, I am taking this opportunity to say to the residents of Gaza, listen to me carefully. You have been warned, get out of there," end quote. And according to the Israeli estimates, about 100,000 people have left Gaza City since they started the offensive at the beginning of August. And again, the original Israeli military plans that were reported said that there was about 1.2 million Palestinian civilians in the city. And there's, as we've been talking about, there's multiple reasons why there hasn't been a mass evacuation, why they haven't all left. The 2 big ones are the fact that there's famine taking place, and for many of them, it's just another forced displacement is essentially a death sentence. The other reason is that Israel continues to bomb central and southern Gaza, the places that they're telling them to go, and continues to kill people on the roads, to aid sites and things like that. So Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz warned earlier in the day that a hurricane would be unleashed on Gaza City. He wrote on X, quote, "Today, a powerful hurricane will strike the skies of Gaza City and the roofs of the terror towers. This is a final warning to the murderers and rapists of Hamas in Gaza in luxury hotels abroad. Release the hostages and lay down your weapons, or Gaza will be destroyed and you will be annihilated. The IDF continues as planned and is preparing to expand the maneuver to decisively defeat Gaza," end quote. I thought it was very interesting that he said they're going to decisively defeat Gaza. Not Hamas. He said Gaza. So the Israeli military began this offensive to conquer Gaza City in early August, and they've kind of slowly escalated. And now things are really ramping up. And last week, the director of Gaza's health ministry said that at least 1,100 Palestinians had been killed in Gaza City in just 20 days. So very heavy airstrikes in this area. So the next one here, the Sumud Gaza Flotilla main ship attacked by a drone in Tunisia. So this is from Al Jazeera. This is their live updates. This kind of just broke that the global Sumud Flotilla says that a drone has struck its main ship, the family boat in Tunisia, causing a fire. It says all passengers and crew are safe. And now the Tunisian National Guard just put out a statement. They're saying that their investigation indicates that the incident on board the family boat took place after life jackets on the ship caught fire. They're saying that no drone was detected, so they just put out that statement. But I've seen the video that they put out, and you could hear something. It looks like something. It sounded like something hit the boat, or maybe there was some kind of explosion. Maybe it was some kind of sabotage. But it caused a fire. And this was while they're docked or at anchor in Tunisia, picking up some more boats for the flotilla. This is the boat that Greta Thunberg was on at the time of the attack, according to these reports here. There was only 6 crew members on board. I guess some of them were in Tunisia. But this is the second time this year that Israel has, we don't know exactly what happened here. I saw one member of the crew saying that it was a grenade or a bomb that was dropped from a drone. And, other reports said it was like a drone that struck it. And now you have the National Guard saying that they didn't detect the drone. So we don't know exactly what happened, but I think we have very good reason to suspect that whatever exactly happened here, and it did cause a big fire that was put out. But whatever happened here, I think it's fair to say that Israel is very likely behind it. And there was a drone hit another Gaza flotilla boat earlier this year when it was off the coast of Malta, so very far from Gaza. So we'll keep an eye on this, and I'll probably write something up about it tomorrow when we figure out exactly what happened. But if you go to the Al Jazeera, you could find this stuff on X and everything. You could see the videos. Visually, you don't really see much, but you can hear. Again, it sounds like some sort of impact, and then you could see smoke and flames. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this, but thank God nobody hurt or killed or anything in this. All right, so the next one here, IDF and starvation kill 71 more Palestinians in Gaza over 24 hours. So Gaza's health ministry said on Monday that Israeli forces killed 65 Palestinians and wounded 320 over the previous 24 hours as the Israeli military continues its heavy assault on Gaza City and continues attacking Palestinians in other parts of the Strip. The health ministry said that another 2 bodies of Palestinians killed in previous attacks were recovered from the rubble. On top of the violent deaths, another 6 Palestinians, including 2 children, starved to death amid the ongoing famine caused by the Israeli siege. This picture here is of a woman mourning a baby who died of malnutrition at the Nasser hospital. Two babies died at the hospital on Monday. And the IDF has continued killing desperate Palestinians seeking aid. The health ministry said that it recorded the death of 14 aid seekers over the 24-hour period, and their death toll for people trying to get food since the end of May has reached 2,430, which is just a huge number. And Israeli attacks on Gaza City on Monday, as we kind of covered this in the last one, but they destroyed more high-rise buildings. And the Israeli military also struck the courtyard of the Christian-run Al-Ali Baptist Hospital, killing at least one person. The Israeli military announced later in the day that 4 of its soldiers were killed in a Hamas attack on the outskirts of Gaza City. All right, so the next one here, the 100-word ceasefire proposal that Trump sent to Hamas. This is from Dropsite News, so they got a hold of the proposal that the U.S. has passed to Hamas. And they quote a Hamas official who says it looks like it was written by Israel, and there was actually somebody, I forget his name, but some Israeli journalist who said that the proposal actually was written by Israel, basically drafted by Israel and then given to the U.S. to give to Hamas. So that's not a good sign, but they published the whole proposal. So I'm just going to scroll down to the text and read it. So this is what the U.S. is calling the main proposal. So number 1, all hostages alive and deceased will be released within 48 hours of signing. Number 2, numbers consistent with previous releases. Palestinian prisoners sentenced to life and detainees from Gaza will be released within 48 hours. Number 3, a ceasefire will go into effect upon implementation for a period of 60 days or until negotiations are concluded. President Trump will guarantee that the parties negotiate in good faith until an agreement is reached. Number 4, the issues to be negotiated include the definition of Hamas, the definition of disarmament, the formation of a new government, the withdrawal of Israeli forces upon the formation of a new government, or upon successful conclusion of negotiations, and amnesty for Hamas members. Number 5, open flow of aid into Gaza upon implementation of this agreement. So very short, very brief, and again, there's no guarantee here of a permanent ceasefire and Israeli withdrawal, which makes Hamas unlikely to accept it. It says President Trump will guarantee that the parties negotiate in good faith until an agreement is reached, but it's not saying he'll guarantee that there will be an Israeli withdrawal or anything like that. So I mean, I don't really have any hope for this leading to anything. It seems like Trump, despite him claiming he wants to end this, is just still playing Israel's games here, and he's still providing the military aid to continue the slaughter, the genocide in Gaza. All right, so the next one here, Smotrich says that West Bank villages should look like Gaza. So Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said on Monday that villages in the Israeli-occupied West Bank should look like cities in Gaza that have been reduced to rubble in response to the shooting at a bus stop in Jerusalem that killed 6 Israelis. So Smotrich, who is a West Bank settler himself, who recently proposed a plan to annex 82% of the Palestinian territory, said that the Palestinian Authority must disappear from the map, even though after this attack, the Palestinian Authority president put out a statement. Mahmoud Abbas, he put out a statement that condemned any targeting of Palestinian and Israeli civilians, and he denounced all forms of violence and terrorism, regardless of their source. So that was a statement put out by the PA after the shooting, yet this is what Smotrich says. He said, quote, "The state of Israel cannot accept the Palestinian Authority that raises and educates its children to murder Jews. The Palestinian Authority must disappear from the map, and the villages from which the terrorists came should look like Rafah and Beit Hanun, 2 cities that have been completely destroyed in Gaza." Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz vowed that the IDF would escalate its operations in the West Bank following the shooting. At the beginning of the year, the IDF began military operations in the West Bank's northern refugee camps that involved the destruction of homes and the displacement of tens of thousands of Palestinians in Jenin, in Tulkaram, and in the Ner Shams refugee camps. I know at least 40,000 people have been displaced, and many homes have been destroyed, roads torn up. They've made them uninhabitable, basically. But this is what Katz said, quote, "Just as we crushed Palestinian terror in the Jenin terror camp and the terror camps in northern Samaria, so we will soon do to additional terror camps. Whoever sponsors terror and directs terror will pay the full price," end quote. So following the Jerusalem attack, Israeli troops conducted a raid in the Jenin refugee camp, which killed at least 2 14-year-old boys. The IDF also raided the home of one of the Palestinians accused of being a shooter in the Jerusalem attack. in a central town in the West Bank, in the central West Bank. And according to Al Jazeera, Israeli forces arrested the suspect's father and brother. So far, no group has taken responsibility for the shooting. And on top of the stepped-up military raids that we've seen in the West Bank, of course, the settler violence has soared. There's been murders and all sorts of attacks on Palestinians. And essentially their strategy is to terrorize people, to drive them out of their homes so they could steal their land. And it looks like that, after this shooting, there was some Israeli, settlers started, attacking villages. So, we're probably going to see a big escalation from both the military and the settlers after this. And it seems like this is something Smotrich and all these guys, they want to provoke Palestinian attacks. They want their pretext to, ramp things up and flatten cities. And, they want to turn the West Bank into Gaza and take as much land as they can. All right, so the next one here, Israeli Supreme Court orders that detained Palestinians must be fed. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. The Israeli Supreme Court ruled that Israel must feed detained Palestinians 3 meals a day. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has touted creating harsh conditions in Israeli prisons for Palestinians. He's bragged about limiting their food. So now there was a ruling from the Israeli Supreme Court that said prisoners they must be fed 3 meals a day to ensure a basic level of existence. The court was split 2-1. It was a 3-judge panel. The issue was brought by Israeli human rights groups who said a system of desperation had been installed for Palestinian prisoners. The ruling said, quote, "We are not speaking here of comfortable living or luxury, but of the basic conditions of survival as required by law. Let us not share in the ways of our worst enemies," end quote. So since October 7th, 2023, scores of Palestinians have died in Israeli captivity. I believe the number is more than 60. Western media and Israeli news outlets have documented Israel's torture, beatings, medical neglect, and rape of Palestinian captives. Just horrific accounts of what is happening inside Israeli jails. There was data, a list obtained by 972 magazine that found only 1 in 4 Palestinians detained by Israel who were detained in Gaza are members of Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad. That means 3 out of 4 are civilians. Ben-Gvir, who runs Israel's prisons, has bragged about the brutal conditions. This is something he said in July 2024 on X, quote, "One of the top goals I set for myself was to worsen the conditions of terrorists in prisons and reduce their privileges to the minimum required by law. I waged an all-out war to implement the long-awaited reform of their conditions and to fulfill the mandate I received from the public. The terrorist conditions in prison were reduced to the minimum. We stopped financial deposits, canceled the canteens for terrorists, removed electrical appliances from cells, ended the terrorists' promenade, drastically reduced their time in showers, abolished the spokesperson status, stopped the indulgent food menu, and replaced it with a minimal one," end quote. So after the order from the Supreme Court, Ben-Gvir said he would defy it. He said, quote, "Justices of the Supreme Court, are you Israel's? We will continue to provide the imprisoned terrorists in jails with the minimum conditions required by law," end quote. All right, so the next one here, Spain announces arms embargo on Israel to stop the genocide. This article is from Brett Wilkins. So Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez on Monday announced a series of 9 new measures, including a total arms embargo aimed at pressuring the government of fugitive Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to stop the genocide in Gaza. So Sanchez, who leads the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, announced the steps during a speech in which he first acknowledged the historical suffering of the Jewish people. He said, quote, "The Jewish people have suffered countless persecutions. They deserve to have their own state and to feel secure. This is why the Spanish government has condemned Hamas attacks from day one. However, there is a difference between defending your country and bombing hospitals or starving innocent children. This is an unjustifiable attack on the civilian population, which the United Nations Rapporteur has described as genocide. 60,000 dead, 2 million displaced, half of them children. This is not self-defense. It is not even an attack. It is the extermination of a defenseless population and a violation of every international law," end quote. So this is the 9 measures that they took: the legal and permanent prohibition on the purchase and sale of weapons, ammunition, and military equipment, a ban on transit through Spanish ports for all ships carrying fuels destined for Israel's military, denial of entry into Spanish airspace for all state aircraft carrying military equipment to Israel, a ban on entry to Spain for all persons directly involved in the genocide, prohibition of imported products from illegal settlements, limitation of consular services for Spanish citizens residing in illegal settlements, strengthened support for the PA, an additional 10 million euros in support of UNRWA, and an increase in overall humanitarian spending for Gaza to reach 150 million euro by 2026. So we will see. This is an interesting quote. He said, quote, "Spain does not have nuclear bombs. We cannot stop the Israeli offensive alone, but we will not stop trying," end quote. So maybe like a hint at Israel having nuclear weapons. All right, so the next one here, War Secretary Hegseth visits Puerto Rico. Again, the rebranding to War Secretary for editorial purposes is very nice. It just seems so natural to call him the War Secretary. But this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and senior Pentagon officials made an unannounced visit to Puerto Rico on Monday. The Department of War has deployed a significant military force to the Caribbean as it prepares for more strikes against alleged Venezuelan cartels. So the governor of Puerto Rico, Jennifer Gonzalez, praised Hegseth for recognizing the American colony's military value. She said, quote, "Honored to welcome Secretary of War Pete Hegseth along with Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to Puerto Rico," end quote. And she said, "We thank Trump for recognizing the strategic value of Puerto Rico. According to the Washington Post, the Department of War is weighing using Puerto Rico as its central hub to wage war against Latin American cartels." And this is after they deployed the F-35s to Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico does seem like it's going to play some kind of role here. This is, again, an unannounced visit here. He just showed up amid these tensions right after the U.S. bombed this boat in the Caribbean. So certainly related to all this stuff that's going on. All right, so the next one here, Venezuela deploying forces to combat drug trafficking. So Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino announced on Sunday a significant deployment of military forces in Venezuela's coastal regions and on its border with Colombia to combat drug trafficking amid soaring tensions with the U.S., which has built up a significant naval force in the region. So Padrino said, quote, "No one is going to come and do the work for us. No one is going to step on this land and do what we're supposed to do," end quote. So the U.S. says that the purpose of its naval deployment is to crack down on drug trafficking, and it claims that Maduro is the leader of a cartel. Allegations that he and other Venezuelan officials strongly deny. The U.S. has not produced any evidence to show that. And also, this was on Monday, Venezuela's Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, held a press conference on Monday where she rejected U.S. claims of narco-terrorism, which she said were being used to justify aggression against Venezuela. And she pointed to some of the data. The data shows that the cocaine, most of the cocaine that goes to the U.S. Moves through the Pacific, not the Caribbean. And also, as I mentioned, a big part of the narrative here about this whole bombing cartels thing is the fentanyl deaths, the opiate deaths here in the U.S., which is an epidemic. It's horrific, and it's affected my life personally. And I think a lot of that, the outrage over that, is what's driving kind of the support for bombing that boat and this naval deployment. But fentanyl doesn't come from Venezuela. It does not come this way. So it's got nothing to do with that. I even see on Twitter all these people, defending this. They always talk about, you're always mentioning fentanyl, but I think it's just important to stress that point. So Padrino said that a total of 25,000 Venezuelan troops would be deployed, up from the 10,000 that have already been deployed in the states of Zulia and Táchira, which border Colombia. He said, quote, "Our commander-in-chief, President Nicolas Maduro, has called upon us to make a special reinforcement to the existing deployment," end quote. So what's interesting here is that, he's saying this is to combat drug trafficking. It's almost like maybe they're trying to do this to placate the U.S. There might be some kind of talks going on behind the scenes because, as I mentioned before, they're still cooperating. Venezuela is still cooperating on the deportations. The U.S. did recently allow Chevron to start pumping oil in Venezuela again. When Trump first came in office, one of the first things that happened was Rick Grinnell. I forget exactly what his position is, but he went to Venezuela and he got some Americans who were in jail there and he brought them home. Maduro has shown that he's very, interested in cooperating with the Trump administration, trying to get some sanctions lifted. Yet Marco Rubio took the helm, and now this is the direction that we're going in. And I do think Trump, genuinely wants to bomb cartels. And he gave Rubio, the lead on this, and it's clearly being turned into something different. And we'll see. Of course, I mentioned yesterday there's the reports and Trump's own words, making it clear that he is considering bombing targets inside Venezuela. So the whole thing is just who knows where this is going to lead, but maybe there is some signs that there's some kind of back channel talks going on here. All right, so the next one here, the IDF attacks sites near several major Syrian cities. So this article is from Jason Ditz. So Israel has reportedly carried out a number of attacks in northern and central Syria this evening. So he wrote this on Monday night. It was Monday evening into Tuesday morning. It looks like these airstrikes were hitting Syria. So the first of the strikes was reported near Homs, hitting a military base, according to Syrian media. The size of the strike was unclear, though locals reported a substantial explosion from the area of the base. And the details are not fully clear with all of these attacks. There was also explosions reported near Palmyra and Latakia. And so there's reports of strikes there. Again, I think this will become more clear on Tuesday exactly what happened here, if there's any casualties. So far, there's no reports of casualties, but it seems like this is a significant number of airstrikes they launched here. Despite all this talk about them, it's actually been a little while since we've seen any reports of Syria and Israel holding talks or anything, but Israel just has continued to bomb and invade southern Syria, even though they supported the regime change effort that put the al-Qaeda guys in power in Syria. Now they use them being there as the excuse to take territory and make sure they don't have a military that could pose any sort of threat to Israel's invasion of southern Syria. All right, so the next one here, Israeli attacks in northeast Lebanon kill 5 and wound 5. Excuse me, sorry. So Israeli warplanes carried out airstrikes in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley on the outskirts of Hermel. The strikes killed at least 5 people and wounded 5 others. The IDF claimed that the sites were used by Hezbollah for training purposes. Details are still emerging about who was actually killed. An anonymous Hezbollah official was quoted in the media as saying that 4 of the 5 slain were members of the group, though it has not been confirmed in official statements. Israel said that the presence of the Hezbollah training sites violated the ceasefire agreement, but this is, where is it? It's in Bekaa Valley. This is north of the Litani River. The ceasefire agreement said that Hezbollah had to pull out of the area south of the Litani River. So it's just, the fact that they can even try to say that Hezbollah is violating the agreement when they've basically torn it up, and Hezbollah hasn't actually fired back, even though Israel's has thousands of ceasefire violations. Just the fact that they even try to cite the ceasefire deal is just crazy. But the attacks continued despite the government saying, yes, we're going to go ahead and disarm Hezbollah. It's just the whole thing is not going in a good direction for Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, Iran tells E3 that it's ready for a nuclear deal. So Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said in an op-ed published by The Guardian on Sunday that Iran was ready to pursue a nuclear deal that would limit its uranium enrichment and increase oversight of its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. The purpose of the op-ed was to tell the UK, France, and Germany to reverse course after the 3 countries known as the E3 took action to trigger the snap-back mechanism of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal that will reimpose UN Security Council sanctions. Araghchi wrote, quote, "The three countries want the world to forget that it was the U.S. and not Iran that unilaterally ended participation in the JCPOA," end quote. Araghchi criticized the E3 for backing U.S. demands for zero uranium enrichment and supporting the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. He said, quote, "It does not make any sense for the E3 to claim participation in a deal pillared on uranium enrichment in Iran, while demanding that Iran must disavow those very capabilities." Interesting way to put it. Openly cheerleading illegal military strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities protected by international law, as Germany's chancellor has done, does not constitute participation. While this lawless behavior is fueling calls for action to ensure never again, Iran remains open to diplomacy. It is ready to forge a realistic and lasting bargain that entails ironclad oversight and curbs on enrichment in exchange for the termination of sanctions, end quote. So while he's saying that Iran is ready to make a deal like that, he's also warning that Iran is ready if Israel attacks again, that Iran is ready for war. He says that if the failure to reach a deal may have consequences destructive that for the region to a whole nother level. So this is what he said. Quote, "Israel may be pitching itself as capable of conducting war on behalf of the West. But as in June, the truth is that the powerful armed forces of Iran are ready and able to once again pummel Israel into running to daddy to be bailed out. The failed Israeli gambit this summer cost American taxpayers billions of dollars, robbed the United States of vital hardware that is now missing from its inventories, and projected Washington as a reckless actor dragged into a rogue regime's wars of choice," end quote. So, again, pretty strong language there, saying we're ready for another fight. If you're going to attack us again, he said that the armed forces of Iran are ready to once again pummel Israel into running to daddy. And daddy, of course, is the USA. And some Iranian officials want Tehran to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty in response to the snapback sanctions. And I think that could be used as a pretext for war, even though it's absurd on its face, because Israel is not a signatory to the treaty, actually has a secret nuclear weapons program and a secret nuclear stockpile, which the U.S. and Israel do not acknowledge. I remember when I debated that FDD guy from the Foundation for Defensive Democracies a few months ago. He said something. He said, I asked him if he cared about Israel's secret nuclear weapons program. He said, well, Israel's not a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. I just care about countries that are signatories, that they live up to their commitments. I mean, just the way he framed it, I thought was very funny. Like he really believes in nuclear treaties so much. That's why he's so focused on Iran's nuclear program and doesn't care about Israel's. All right, so the next one, the last story here, Russia brushes off threats of new U.S. and EU sanctions. So we've seen threats from U.S. and European officials that they're going to put new sanctions on Russia. And Russia's brushing it off, essentially saying, it hasn't had an effect up to this point, so we're not worried about it. This is Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. He said, quote, "In general, one thing can probably be said. This unprecedented number of sanctions that have been imposed against our country over the past 4 years has had no effect. No sanctions will be able to force the Russian Federation to change this stalwart position," end quote. And these comments came after Trump said that he was ready to impose more sanctions on Russia. And Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, also said that the U.S. should partner with the EU to collapse the Russian economy. And again, Peskov shrugging these threats off. And also in his rhetoric, and this is what we've seen from Russian officials still, he focused his criticism on Ukraine and the Europeans and spoke nicely of Trump. This is, we've seen this from Putin, even though it does not seem like a deal is likely and Trump's been talking all this smack. They've kept things very cordial with the U.S., saying that they appreciate the new administration's efforts toward peace. That's kind of been their message. I do think that the chances of a deal are pretty slim. But when it comes to this whole Russia-Ukraine situation, I'm much less worried about this turning into nuclear war than when Biden was in and there was no high-level contact. At least that's kind of a silver lining, I guess, that at least they're talking, even though, unfortunately, it does look like this war will continue. And, of course, when you're talking about Russia, when we're talking about Trump's now sending these long-range cruise missiles to Ukraine, so that risk of nuclear escalation is always it's always going to be there. So I really do hope that this war ends somehow, but it's hard to imagine a path. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints, one from Roger Harris and Joe Emmersberger, all elements in place for a U.S. decapitation strike on Venezuela. One from Ted Snyder and Nikolai Petro, for Ukraine and Russia, compromise aligns with necessity. One from Ramsey Baroud, a global awakening, how people power is reshaping Western policy on Palestine. One from W. James Antle, the third, in defense of defense. And our spotlight is from Connor Eccles. Why is Congress MIA on looming Venezuela war? So that is it. Please go. Oh, I didn't plug the fundraiser. If you could help us out, we are fundraising. We have a nice letter from John Mearsheimer telling people to support antiwar.com. So please go to antiwar.com/donate if you have the means and you can help us out. We are 100% reader funded. This is how we're able to provide you with the coverage and content that we do. We have to do these fundraisers a few times a year. So please, again, if you have the means, go to antiwar.com/donate. Other ways you could support us is just sharing our work, telling your friends about antiwar.com, following us on social media. All that stuff helps us out. We're never going to put our content behind a paywall or anything like that. We want it to get out to as many people as possible. That's the whole purpose of what we're doing. But anyway, that's it for me for today. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.